Hey guys, I am in a state of fasting at the moment, and prayer naturally goes hand in hand with that. And I can feel my energy perfectly aligned and centered through my body. I can feel it. And I can feel the presence of God. And I've only fasted short times, 4 days without food. I feel God's presence due to it. Because my flesh is quiet. My flesh is humbled. Without fuel for the flesh, it can't misbehave. It can't ask you to do this or do that. It can't get distracted. So the reason I'm fasting is not spiritual. If I fast spiritually, you'll never hear about it. You might see me losing weight, but you won't hear me talk about it, because I know fasting for a purpose is a private thing between you and Mother, Father, Creator. An affliction of the flesh of any sort is a private thing between you and Creator. So this is actually for a medical reason. Now, my body lost appetite last week, and I listened to it because my body is fighting these infections. When it loses its appetite, my body is more intelligent than I and you and anybody else. You could not possibly comprehend the mathematics that your body does to balance your chemistry inside your body, for example. It just knows so much more than we do. And it just has so much more ability than we do. And it is us, of course. Not to speak of it in a completely separate entity, but that working of your body that you don't control. The thing that grew my hair, the thing that grew my body from a baby, the thing that's growing my son's body. The thing that makes your heart beat, that balances your blood oxygen levels, etc. It's all going on without your interference. And thus, when you get sick and you lose your appetite, unfortunately, it's the one thing you can interfere with. And I don't. When I lose my appetite, I know my body needs to deal with something. And your body is strongest at fighting any form of sickness whilst you have no food to digest, because there's more energy to direct to doing that. So in this union with nature, we start to understand the problems that we face as a species, because we still have that nature and or spirit, and we have flesh or carnal mind, the ego. And neither's wrong or right. But what I can guarantee is, in the instance where you go against the natural rhythm of your body, then you're wrong. For instance, in the entirety, your ego is not the enemy, the nature is not the enemy, but there's an equilibrium, a balance we can find to have a good life here on earth by finding a balance between those two things. But we ourselves, we've disconnected in our society from nature's wisdom, nature's intelligence, which is beyond ours. We don't accept it. We pummel and we beat nature into submission is how we feel. And some aspects of nature need beating into submission. We need certain medications to kill things. Can you even begin to imagine a world without modern medicine, for example? My children, most of them, would suffer terribly without the pain relief or the anti-seizure medications and so on and so forth. And would you even hazard a guess how unconnected a world would be without technology and electricity and so on? I mean, we need our carnal mind to live the way that we live. But because we live that way, we lose our connection with nature. And nature is where you can learn a great deal about how it must be for God. Now, the other day I began to learn something about God and his passivity. Which God am I referring to is open for philosophical and theological debate, because the God I'm referring to might not be the original God. There is the discussion that I recorded a video on the Archon and the Demiurge, but it's 40 minutes long, so I want to trim it down, but maybe I'll record it today. The Archon and the Demiurge means that this reality was created by a lesser God, and our God is trying to fix this reality by sending people like Jesus and other messengers like Buddha into the mix to say, I can change this, like having a bad pot of stew and you're throwing bits of salt and herbs in to make it taste good. It's taking time to get the right balance. Or it's the original source of creation. So whichever I'm learning about, what I learned was I came out my house the other day and I saw a baby bird hopping along the branch, and its parents were there as well, and it was very beautiful. You know, I've got Aslan with me, and there's new life outside my house, literally outside. So, wow. And I'm standing watching, and it's mid-afternoon, and would you believe, right at the foot of this tree, which isn't a very high tree, about eye level with me, there was a mongoose appeared, and I knew why the mongoose was there. The mongoose was going to eat that bird if it fell, and it was watching and waiting. I thought it was going to climb the tree and take it. This crippled me. I've got new life here, and then I've got this other life that's going to kill it. And I didn't like it. And normally here, I never intervene or interfere in nature in that way. The thing I'll intervene with are the carnivorous ants, because I can't bear to see them engulf something. I mean, they can eat rats even. Can you imagine being eaten alive by a little bite? It's horrendous. So I don't let it happen. I provide mercy. And they are God's child, they are God's creation, but I say that, you know, there's no need for that level of suffering here, which makes me lean towards the demiurge concept quite often, to be honest with you. If you sit in nature, you really see that nature is quite unpleasant at times. It's not loving, not always. So I intervene in that sense, but I couldn't cope with what I'd saw. I'd connected my love to this baby bird and not the mongoose, and thus I made noise, so the mongoose left. But later that day, I began to think about what I'd done. And I spoke not long ago about the idea of having a sphere of love, a physical sphere of energy that's all around your body. We've all played computer games where they have this ball of electric around them or whatever when we were kids, and you can imagine this, you know, imagine one of those inflatable balls that you run inside and you bounce along things, etc. Just got this whole ball around you. And the concept from there is that when you are love, when you simply are love, non-judgmental love, that as you walk through life with that sphere of love around you, as you meet people, they enter your sphere. And because you're busy upholding that loving nature, as they enter your sphere and come into contact with you, your response is predominantly, nearly always love. And thus, we can go around our life trying to be love instead of allowing our love to be directed and objectified. However, I objectified my love towards the baby bird and excluded the mongoose from my sphere of love. And I saved the bird's life, but I might not have been meant to do that because nature was playing out. And however, whatever reason I saw that, it taught me a very strong lesson. Because I evaluated it and I really thought, and I said, hold on a moment. If I am to meet a situation like that with nothing but love, then I enter a very difficult position. And this is a position I presume can explain away God's passivity in certain events. Because when you evaluate factors that you can't see, you begin to realize that love is not as straightforward as that's not the nice thing to do. Because as I sit on the afternoon after that and I think of that mongoose, I know here that sometimes animals go malnourished. It's a tough environment. And I thought, just as a hypothetical situation, that mongoose maybe has bad milk and it has children back at home, just to bring children back into it as I had a baby bird. And maybe in eating that baby bird, she would have saved the life of her children because she would have went home with the right nutrients in it to produce the right milk to stop it from dying from its nutrient deficiency. And thus, because I stopped that, I created suffering in the life of a baby mongoose. Potentially, I'm not saying that's what happened, but you have to look at it that way sometimes. You have to contemplate and meditate and contemplate to learn and to unravel the wisdom that's contained in the concepts of things like love and the actions of things like love and the experience of things like love. And as I got to that point, I said, wow, so actually in future, if I ever come across that scene again, the most loving thing to do is to not take sides, because you allow both to enter your sphere of love. But then by not taking sides, you allow the natural laws that God initially founded this reality upon, that we all must abide by and sometimes are bent, but most of the time are not. Then you would let that play out, and perhaps the bird would die, perhaps the parents would have fended off the mongoose, who knows? But what I know is, as I come in as a being, looking upon there with the same powers in that situation that God has, the power to stop it, the power to keep it going. Or perhaps not the same powers that God has. Perhaps God doesn't have the power to intervene because of the physical laws he set in place. Perhaps he said, okay, I'll leave the physical laws in place. So I realize that in my position where I can play God with those two beings, that really next time if I see that, if I truly want to make sure I do the highest level of love, passivity would have to be my action. It's a very funny thing. And when you get deeper into it and you start looking at nature and you say, why does God do that? Why does God allow that? And you say, perhaps his passivity is in fact a very highly developed level of love that we can't even get our heads around. Because God is love. God is light. He doesn't objectify his love to this one or this one. And thus all his creations are loved, regardless. That's why he gives opportunity for negative energies to express themselves, because he gave way for them to be created. They are his children. And if I can feel that level of love for a baby bird that's not of my species, or for a mongoose, then God can feel it for all things. I have love for trees and everything. I really have a relationship with every form of life on this planet, I think. Bird, mammal, reptile, plant life, fungi, everything. I have relationships with humans, of course, as well. And when you realize that you interfering in something because you perceive, okay, I need to interfere and stop that because it's not okay, you realize that you don't have the awareness and the wisdom of Creator. And that Creator has awareness and wisdom way beyond what we can comprehend. And that awareness and wisdom would, I believe, lead you to a state of passivity, which is actually simply a very highly developed level of love, because you can evaluate all eventualities. If I come across a situation like that again, however, I'm not saying that I will respond by watching. When I'm out in the bush, I have to watch. If I see something taking something down, I have to watch it. That's what's happening out there. But when I can intervene and stop the suffering, perhaps I will, because I wouldn't have expected I would there, but I did. But that's because I'm not God, and I perhaps haven't developed my love and wisdom to that degree where I can say with certainty it's not okay to intervene because that guy might have children who's about to eat that child. So for certainty, there's no right or wrong solution to that. But what I do know is if you're to walk as love, with your sphere of love intact, then when you do meet a situation like that, it's understandable where passivity would be the highest form of love. And it's a very deep contemplation to go into, but I've gone into it a lot. And because I've gone into that and I've picked up on that a little, and I look out at the world and the nature around me, and some of the questions I've said to God, how can you do that? Some of those questions have led me to passivity as a very, very high form of developed love is perhaps the answer. I'm not saying it definitely is. But in that instance, if the scenario went that the mongoose had a baby somewhere and it was going to die without it eating, then my love directed toward the bird neglected the mongoose, and my love created suffering. But if I just allowed my love to see it, and I didn't interfere, and I said, this is nature, it's happening. No free will was involved, no human desire or thought was involved, it's just nature playing out in a tree in Tanzania. Then I should passively embrace it and say, I respect the laws of God. I do not wish to interfere and allow it to play out. But somehow within me, I don't respect the laws of God fully. And thus, I intervene. And I don't respect them fully. The reason I don't fully respect them is the suffering I see in the children around me. And sometimes I get very angry at God that I believe that God has the power beyond our free will to open the hearts of people and turn them into servants. I believe in this. But I think he respects free will, which is a necessity. But when I come to places like this and you see that free will has created immeasurable suffering in the lives of innocent children, then I get frustrated at God and I tell him, if I were you, I'd intervene. Perhaps he did intervene using myself. But what I mean is, energetically, I would intervene. I would stand an angel on the shoulder of the parents neglecting the child until they broke and they came back. But I'm not God. I'm not God. But I have stood on the shoulders of parents who were neglecting their children. And some of those parents became our most loving care workers. So I know that tactic can work. I just wish he would employ it from time to time. Or perhaps he's just on such a developed level of love that I can't comprehend and we can't comprehend, that I'm totally wrong. And passivity is a very highly developed form of love instead of some form of neglect. I love you all.